Earlier today, October 27th, two US Air Force F-16s struck a weapons storage facility used by militants linked to Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC. The strikes, which took place near Boukamal in eastern Syria, were in response to the 19 attacks on U.S. bases and personnel in Iraq and Syria since October 17th, including 3 new ones yesterday. Air Force Brigadier General Pat Ryder said 21 U.S. personnel were injured in 2 of those assaults that used Iranian-supplied drones to target American military bases in Iraq and Syria. Politico reports that of those injured, 19 have been diagnosed with traumatic brain injury. The U.S. bases attacked by militant drones yesterday were Al-Assad Air Base in western Iraq and Al-Tanf Garrison in southeastern Syria. The Islamic resistance in Iraq posted a statement claiming their responsibility for the attack, saying they had fired a salvo of rockets at a base and, quote, they hit their targets directly and precisely, end quote. U.S. troops have maintained a presence at Al-Tanf in Syria for a number of years to train Syrian allies and monitor ISIS militant activity. Battle damage assessment released to the public following the F-16 strike was limited. The Pentagon said there had been Iranian-aligned militia and IRGC personnel on the base and no civilians, but didn't have any information yet on casualties or whether the intended targets were hit. DoD officials would also not say what weapons the F-16s used during the strike, but in subsequent remarks, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said, precision self-defense strikes are a response to a series of ongoing and mostly unsuccessful attacks against U.S. personnel in Iraq and Syria by Iranian-backed militia groups. The precision munitions carried by U.S. Air Force F-16s include laser-guided GBU series bombs and Joint Direct Attack Munitions, or JDAMs, which are GPS-guided bombs. In this case, JDAMs were most likely used because of their superior standoff ranges, which kept the fighters out of surface-to-air missile envelopes. In his remarks about the mission, SecDef attempted to thread the same needle as President Biden has been attempting to thread in recent days, stating that the strikes had nothing to do with Israel's ongoing war with Hamas and was solely in response to the attacks on U.S. bases in the region. The United States does hold Tehran responsible for funding, arming, equipping, and directing the proxies, and intends to hit Iranian-backed groups suspected of targeting Americans as strongly as possible to deter future aggression, but at the same time also wants to avoid inflaming the region and provoking a wider conflict. The militant attacks have caused the Pentagon concern about the force protection posture of the American bases in Iraq and Syria, and conjure up the specter of the Beirut barracks bombings in 1983 that killed 241 U.S. Marines and 58 French paratroopers. Subsequent fact-finding after that disaster revealed that the guards hadn't carried loaded weapons and that the perimeter's barbed wire was insufficient. Further, the notion that the mere presence of American forces was a deterrent against Islamic militants was flawed. The presence of troops without a military objective didn't make them a deterrent, it made them a target. So now the Pentagon is sending 2 battalions of Patriot and Avenger missile systems from Fort Liberty and Fort Sill, a terminal high-altitude area defense, also known as THAAD battery from Fort Bliss, and a few more fighter squadrons from various air bases in the U.S. and Europe that will operate out of Jordan. Pentagon spokesman Brigadier General Ryder said that plus-up of defense systems means about 900 additional troops will be deployed to the region. On the Navy front, the Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group is approaching the Strait of Gibraltar after leaving their East Coast home ports of Norfolk and Mayport on October 13th and 14th and transiting the Atlantic. In a previous episode, I discussed 3 options for where that strike group might go, and a few days ago, the Pentagon announced they were doing option 3, which is headed right through the Med, through the Suez Canal, and into the North Arabian Sea, certainly as a signal to Iran. At the same time, the Bataan Amphibious Ready Group remains quote-unquote disaggregated, with the USS Mesa Verde in the Med and the USS Bataan and the USS Carter Hall in the Gulf of Aden. The Pentagon had briefed that the ARG would reaggregate with Bataan and Carter Hall transiting the Suez Canal northbound to rejoin Mesa Verde in the Mediterranean, but following the attacks on U.S. military bases in Iraq and Syria and the Houthis, a Yemeni militant group firing long-range missiles at Israel that were in turn shot down by the USS Carney, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer located in the Red Sea, the 3 amphibs are staying where they are. And USNI News is reporting that the international naval presence in the Eastern Med plussed up this week, with the French Navy sending the Mistral-class amphibious warship Tonnerre to join 2 guided missile frigates already on station. The Royal Navy has also sent Bay-class landing ship Dock, RFA Lime Bay, and the auxiliary ship RFA Argus to the region. Meanwhile, as international leaders urge the Israeli government to show restraint in their response to the terrorist attack of October 7th, the IDF remains marshaled at the Gaza border, poised to invade. As Hamas continues rocket attacks, one of which recently hit Tel Aviv, Israeli Air Force surgical strikes on Hamas targets have intensified, and a small number of Israeli tanks moved into Gaza and shot rounds at Hamas targets in what IDF spokesman Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus described as an early small tactical incursion, preparing the battlefield for future operations. Domestically, the Israeli government has been criticized by survivors of the Hamas terror raid for both the intelligence failure that completely missed the threat and a lack of support afterwards. In general, the Netanyahu administration has been blamed for focusing on the security of new settlements near the West Bank, mostly populated by political allies, and ignoring the security of settlements in the south near the border to the Gaza Strip. More on this volatile situation as the information becomes available, so if you're not already a subscriber, become one so you don't miss anything. And in the meantime, I look forward to talking to you again very soon.